Now, Tottenham Hotspur are in action on Saturday, 3 p.m. kickoff at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It is being dubbed as the Thomas Frank Derby. Of course, his former club, Brentford, travel to North London. Now, Spurs are in 11th. Brentford are down in 13th. Now, Tottenham Hotspur need a win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The last time we won a home game in the Premier League was on the opening weekend when we beat Burnley 3-0. Now, Tottenham Hotspur had lost 3 games on the trot in all competitions against Arsenal, PSG and against Fulham. But midweek, we managed to come back at St James's Park and get a 2-2 draw, getting a point in the Premier League. Gareth, first up, before we talk about the Brentford game, your thoughts on the Newcastle game? Of course, Christian Romero, great header, overhead kick as well. But we failed to have a shot on target in a first half again. The last time we've actually had a shot on target in a Premier League game in the opening 45 minutes was on the 1st of November, and that was against Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think that was our only shot on target in the whole game. So shots on target are at an absolute premium for Spurs at the moment, which is something that you can't really believe that you're hearing. A team that Spurs are kind of billed as a team that scored loads of goals and maybe they don't keep the back door shut. But under Thomas Frank, it's been a real struggle. Not just we've scored goals to be fair, but the XG really worries you, Chris, that we've scored. I think it's 21 goals from an XG of 12. So we're outperforming by over 9 goals, and that's not sustainable. And for all the talk, Chris, of have we got strikers or have we got attackers that are good enough? Well, they're scoring plenty of goals. This team from very little. So there is a bit of a clinical edge to this team. I know a lot of goals are coming from defenders. Mickey Van de Ven's got a few. And of course, Romero got 2 against Newcastle on Tuesday night. So it's a really strange one with Spurs. I mean, that game on Tuesday night, Chris, if you hadn't seen the game, you'd have looked at the end of the game for 2-2. Must have been a great game. But for 72 minutes, neither team really looked like scoring. Newcastle looked slightly more dangerous. But, it wasn't like both keepers had a lot to do. And it kind of just all went a bit rogue in the last 20 minutes. But in the end, decent point, but still a lot left to be desired about the performance, Chris.
What positives do you take from Tuesday night? Because, of course, like I mentioned, losing to Arsenal, PSG, Fulham, it was very important that Spurs got points. Now, we got 1 at St James's Park. That, of course, is a positive. Now, also, Gareth, what I wanted to ask is what's your views on Thomas Frank right now? Because it's very, very mixed again, isn't it? The mood amongst the Spurs fan base always seems to be very mixed. Some people behind the manager, some people have given up on the manager. Where do you stand on the manager right now? Can Thomas Frank turn this around? Because like I mentioned earlier, Spurs are 5 points away from the top 4, but we're only 5 points above 17th where we finished last season. Now, it's very, very tight in the middle of the Premier League table right now. But like I also mentioned, we need a win. We need a home win.
Well, Chris, we spoke about that the next 2 home games in the Premier League were going to be crucial. Because we were playing arguably the 2 worst away teams in the league. Fulham was a disaster. They won their first away game of the season at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And Brentford, I believe, have lost 6 out of 7 away games, only 1-1 away at West Ham. So they're a team that struggles on the road, and this would have been viewed as another big opportunity to break that home curse. Because if you look at the fixtures coming up, Forest away, Liverpool at home. And yes, Liverpool have their problems, but it's always a difficult game. I think we've got Palace away, Brentford away, which will be a lot tougher than playing them at home. Sunderland at home, who've been flying. Bournemouth away. I mean, it's a very difficult run after this, in my opinion. So, this is our best opportunity to get 3 points between now and the end of Christmas, I believe. So it's a huge game. Yes, it seems to be a very funny weekend, Chris, of managers returning to play former teams. This is the 3rd game already. So it's going to be edgy because of that. But Brentford must be coming to the stadium thinking, if we could have handpicked an away game this week at Spurs, because if they were going to a Wolves, for example, who can't win a game, there's pressure on Brentford to win that. But all the pressure here is on Spurs, and that could play into Brentford's hands. And I watched Brentford against Arsenal on Wednesday night, and they made it very, very difficult for Arsenal. They never conceded that many chances. So you can be sure that Keith Andrews has got a plan in place for how they hurt Spurs. It's two teams that play a very similar style. Both teams like to play on set pieces, like to get long throws under the box. So I don't think it's going to be the most entertaining game, Chris. I think if you looked at all the games on Saturday, this is probably the game that you feel it may be the lowest scored game of the weekend and probably the most unwatchable. But I think where Spurs are at the minute, Chris, I think we would just take anything to break this home record and get a win. Well, that's sustainable, but I think the most important thing this weekend is just getting a win at home and trying to build some confidence in this group, because there isn't a lot to get behind at the moment. The players don't look totally behind the system and the style of play. There's been reports some players look a bit disenfranchised. There's been arguments that the fans are at home are affecting the players, and it just all seems like excuses to me, Chris. I mean, if you're good enough, you go out there and you get 3 points no matter what. These players are professional. They've played in teams that, yes, it'd be difficult sometimes to get results, but player for player, Spurs are a lot stronger than Brentford. So there really shouldn't be any excuses on Saturday if we don't get 3 points.
And your opinions on Thomas Frank right now?
Chris, I mean, I said it last week that I think there's a possibility that he could be gone by Christmas, and I don't think everybody was agreeing with that. But I don't think this week has changed my mind. Fulham was a disaster. Newcastle away.
What do you say? Well. What do you say to the people, the fans that are really behind Thomas Frank and say, look, these things take time. You've got to be patient with it. And when we get the likes of Maddison, Kulusevski, Solanke back, things are going to be very different. What do you say to those fans? Because I have spoke to so many fans in the last couple of weeks, and honestly, Gareth, I would literally say 50-50 of people saying, oh, this is really boring football, blah, blah, blah. And then I talk to loads of people who say, when we get all of these creative players back, Thomas Frank will get these players playing. He'll get, everyone ticking and everything will be great. And we'll be playing entertaining football and we'll be scoring goals, creating chances. We won't have this XG, these dreadful XG stats that we keep reading out, after each show. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I think I've said it as well in the past, Chris, that these fans that want to give the manager time, I totally understand that a manager needs time. I coach myself, and I know it's not easy, and I know it's very difficult at professional level because the pressure and the scrutiny that Thomas Frank's under, he's not used to it because he came from Brentford. But show me the evidence that tells me we're going to get better anytime soon. We've been in a dire straits now for the last number of weeks. The performances haven't got any better, in my opinion. Yes, we got a decent point there, all right, but it wasn't a pretty watch. I think 2 shots on target, 2 goals. We're really struggling. It's basically got to the point that if we get 2 shots on target, we need to hope they go on because we're not going to get any more than that. So I'd like to see some signs of improvement for me to get behind this coach. Of course, I'm behind him, but for me to keep giving him more time, I need to see something. And I was hoping this would be the period that we would do it. Fulham at home, Newcastle away, Brentford at home, Slavia Prague. You need to show me in these 4 games, because if it doesn't happen in these 4 games, the next 4 are much more difficult. So I'm struggling to see how it would happen in any of those games. Yes, we can talk about injuries all day long, but every club's got injuries, Chris. Every club in every season gets injuries. I know it's been unfortunate that it's happened to Kulusevski and Maddison, but Ange had a back 4 last year that was completely not equipped for this level, and he still found ways to get them to play out and score goals. Yes, we were conceding a lot, but we still were a decent watch at times. And when he did get players back, he did feel that when players come back, we'll get better. I don't know if it's the same with Thomas Frank, because Thomas Frank's strengths have been, being solid at the back, but that seems to have gone in recent weeks. We conceded another 2 goals in midweek. There seems to be a lot of shots from outside the box. There's not enough pressure on the ball. I watched Newcastle press us in that first half. Our press was nowhere near as good as Newcastle's. So I'm just not seeing enough for me at the moment to be convinced that this manager is going to be what's good for Spurs in the future. I really hope I'm wrong, but I think this is it, Chris. Next 2 home games, if we don't at least win one of them, I think his job becomes untenable. If you can't beat Fulham, Brentford, and Slavia Prague at home, with all these other results, all the damning XG numbers, the style of play, I just don't see how he could remain in his job. I think we would have to change it up. And even if it is just an interim, we need to get the feel good factor about Spurs, because people are saying already about writing the season off, but it's not just about that, Chris. We've got another 10, 11, 12 home games, possibly more if we go further in Europe in the FA Cup. Who wants to sit through this all season between now and the end of between now and May? I mean, if it's deflating every week at home when you can't really create an opportunity. Never mind win a game. We're not creating enough to win games, so it's got to change, and it's got to change this weekend and Tuesday night against Slavia Prague. We need to get back to where we were against Copenhagen. I know Copenhagen aren't they aren't the creme de the creme, but we cut them to pieces at times, and we need to find a way to do that more often. And if that happens, the fans will get on board, because we're realistic. We know this team still needs work, and we need better recruitment. But those players are a lot better than what they're showing at the moment. A lot better.
Yeah, desperately need a win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium Saturday afternoon. Now, Spurs have lost just one of their 8 Premier League meetings with Brentford, winning 4 and drawing 3, winning each of the last 3 in a row. Brentford have lost 3 of their 4 Premier League away games against Spurs, with the exception of a 3-1 win at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in May 2023. Spurs have lost their last 3 Premier League London derbies. Gareth, how do you expect Thomas Frank to set up in terms of formation and in terms of personnel? Because one thing is for sure, we can never, as Spurs fans, guess a starting 11 under Thomas Frank. And at the moment, it's quite difficult to even predict what formation he's going to play.
Well, Chris, I don't want to sound disrespectful to the manager, but I'm not sure right now he knows what team he's picking tomorrow, because apparently what we're hearing, he keeps changing it at the last minute, and it's frustrating the players, whether it's team selection, formation, instructions. And I'm not saying you believe everything you hear in reports, but it doesn't surprise me, because when you see him making the subs, they get absolutely peppered with information before they go on. It takes forever for Spurs to get a sub onto the pitch, because there's so much instructions. And he seems to go back to his seat a lot and be watching stuff on that iPad setup. And, I would love to know what is being said. I would love to hear the conversations that he's having with his coaching staff, because he was writing stuff down on his notepad a lot. And I would love him to write down what he thinks is going well or what's working, because there's a lot more that's not working. I mean, for me, there wouldn't be enough paper to write on, because there's so many problems. I'm struggling here to pick out the positives. A lot better from set pieces. That is it. I don't know what else has got better. We're not as good at playing out of the back. You could argue maybe our defenders are scoring more goals, but for me, I want my attackers scoring the goals. Yes, it's great having players to pop up with goals. Fullbacks keeps chopping and changing that. Doesn't know what his favourite 2 are. Midfield seems to change a lot. Then when he brings Palhinha and Bentancur in, we look incapable of breaking teams down, especially at home. Chopping and changing on the wide players a lot. And I am so confused as to what the actual plan is. And I don't know whether they're doing that many things, trying to change that many things, that they're almost just completely stuck on what they do. And that's why the formation's changing a lot. The personnel's changing a lot. And he keeps referring to it as being rotation. But for me, it's not rotation. I just don't think he has an idea of what his best formation is, what his best 11 is. And basically, if somebody asked me now, if somebody asked Thomas Frank, what is your identity? What is your Tottenham's team identity? I don't know how you could answer it without talking a load of gibberish, because I don't know what we are. We're not a team that looks particularly well organised when we sit back and have a plan to counter-attack. We're not a team that has an idea of how to break teams down when we're on the ball. So I am lost at the minute, Chris, with this whole Thomas Frank project, to be totally honest with you.
Do you think that Thomas Frank thinks that it is going well then in the Premier League? And, no manager would want this winless run to continue, certainly at home. Like I mentioned at the very start, to only win once at home in the Premier League, and now we're on the 5th of December when we're having this chat. Also, Gareth, what I wanted to ask, in his press conferences, I don't think I've sat through a press conference where I've not heard the words principles and layers. What does he mean by principles and layers all the time? Because he mentions it all the time. Layers in terms of what? And when I mention the home record, Tottenham have won just 3 of their last 16 Premier League home games in 2025, drawing 3 and losing 10. It's Tottenham's lowest win rate across a calendar year in our league history, 19%. Meanwhile, our 10 home defeats this year is also a joint high for the club, along with 1994 and 2003. And I can tell you what, 1994 at that point is we had injuries galore, and things weren't good at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he keeps referring to those 2 phrases, like you pointed out. But what I've noticed him say in his interviews and his press conferences a lot is he talks a lot about what the opposition did in the game, and that really worries me. That he'll say that if he's asked a question about the creativity, he'll put it back as our team didn't create a lot either. We only conceded 4 or 5 shots in the game. We low XG, so it's almost like he's feeling that he's being justified because teams aren't creating as many chances as they were last year against us. But we're not winning enough games, and that is the truth, Thomas. That nail has got to be nailed on his head. That you can talk about the stats all day long, but Spurs, for me, they've got to have the lowest attacking numbers in the league. I think it's in the bottom 3 or 4. So that is shameless for the quality that he's got at his disposal. Yes, he's missing players, but he's still got a lot better than some of the other teams in the league. And for me, if you lose a game 2-1, like we did against Fulham, and he says, oh, well, after the first 10, 15 minutes, they didn't create anything. Well, they were 2-0 up in the game. So I don't know what relevance that's got to the conversation. What did your team do to try and get back into the game? It needed a Kudos wonder strike, and all or not, we didn't create anything, bar a couple of huffs and puffs in 85 plus out of time minutes against a team that couldn't win a game away from home. So no, I completely checked out Chris with his press conferences, and I used to look forward to the press conferences under Ange. And look, I know Ange had his flaws, but there was a charisma there. It was entertaining. I used to enjoy Pochettino's press conferences. I don't know why anyone even tunes into these press conferences, because 1, he speaks in riddles. 2, it's a lot of it's complete nonsense, and 3, I'm not seeing anything. He keeps saying that these layers, I'm not seeing any layers being added. If anything, we're getting worse.
Gareth, a lot of people who probably listen and watch this clip will say that you're being very negative about Spurs. Some people will say you're being realistic, and you're saying exactly how it is. We're going to have a mixed reaction. There's absolutely no doubt about that. What positives do you see under Thomas Frank since he has arrived?
Well, that's it. Maybe we've got a bit better from set pieces, defending them and scoring from them. Style of play, there's nothing about that excites me. I'm really struggling, Chris, to be honest. I don't know what other positives there is, because you could say up until a few weeks ago, maybe the away form was a positive, but if you can't win a game at home, it doesn't matter how good you are away from home, because you're only dealing in 50% of the games. So, and our away form has not been that good in the last few weeks. I mean, we were beating Paris, we were beat up at Arsenal. Newcastle away, decent point, but performance wasn't great, and on an hour day we could have lost that. So look, Chris, I take no pleasure in sitting here and being negative. I was actually quite positive last year, even when the results were poor up until a certain point around January, February time, that let's give Ange more time, because I'm seeing butts here that when he gets players back, it could get better. Unfortunately, in the league, it went really bad in that second half of the season, but you could argue that he did put a lot into Europe. Romero and Van de Ven, even when they were fit, didn't play a lot in the Premier League. And even when they did, they only played maybe 45 minutes because he wanted to keep them fresh for Europe. And in the end, that paid off. Would we have been any better under Ange this season? I'm not sure, but I can tell you one thing for sure, we'd have been a lot more entertaining. And if you can't win games of football, at least give the fans something to get behind. At the minute, we're doing nothing. We're getting beat up easily. Any team coming to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium must be sensing they can win. And I think that's the biggest indictment you can give this squad of players and manager, that we could be playing a team in the FA Cup at home this weekend, and they would fancy their chances of getting a win here. So that has got to change. Yes, Thomas Frank's only here since August, but he's had some favourable home games, and the record's not getting any better. So he has to take his hand in this, and God help tomorrow if we don't score early in that game, Chris. The fans are going to be on the backs of the players right away. We've got to go out there with aggression, intensity, with a belief, get the ball moving, play aggressive football, get the fans on side, give them the arms up, get anything to get them behind the team and get a one, because I can guarantee a one tomorrow will have a massive release on the club, the players, the manager, and the fans. And we've always talking about, Chris, connections are broken at the moment, but connections can be fixed. And the best way to fix connections is winning games of football, especially in your own backyard. So it's got to start tomorrow against Brentford, and it's got to be followed up on Tuesday against Slavia Prague. And as it says, Chris, forget about the positives. Don't win those 2 games. It's P45 out the door. Not good enough for me.
On the opponents, Brentford, of course, Keith Andrews took over from Thomas Frank. Of course, he was the set-piece coach. What have you made of the job that he has done so far? Some people within Brentford have come out and said that not much has changed since Thomas Frank has left, because everything has been pretty much the same. What have you made of the job that he's done? What have you made of Brentford this season? And who are the players that Spurs should really look at to be threats for Brentford?
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not glad that Brentford are doing well. Of course, Keith Andrews is a manager, an Irishman. It's always great to see an Irishman do well. He was a very good pundit when he was working on the Ireland games. He was very knowledgeable. I remember Darren Bent saying in the summer, when everybody was, criticising the appointment that Brentford made, oh, this is a big risk, this could cost them their status. But the one thing you would say about Brentford, Chris, is they rarely make mistakes when it comes to recruitment. And they've got this appointment spot on, despite all the negativity. Even some of their own fans were questioning it. But Keith Andrews was obviously, he obviously had a higher ceiling than just being a set-piece coach. But he's obviously sat there and learned his trade. And he's done a fantastic job, and it was not an easy job to come into because of the success that Brentford had under Thomas Frank. They lost players in the summer as well, and if anything, they look just as strong, Chris. So no, I'm expecting nothing but a tough game against Brentford on a Saturday. And if we're not at the races, Chris, we will get turned over here. Brentford, in my opinion, are a bit more of a better team than Fulham are. I think, yes, Fulham have goals on them, but this Brentford team are a lot more structured. And they got a massive threat. They could call this a set-piece derby from long throws, because they've got a player that can throw the ball just as far as Danzo. And it's caused teams a lot of problems this season already. So I don't expect the ball to be in play too much in this game. I think both teams will be happy enough with long throws and corners into the box, because that's where their most successes come from this league. So apologies to anyone going to the game. I really hope it pans out differently and Spurs go about it in a much more proactive way. But all the signs point to it being a really cagey, nervy game.
Good job ticket sales aren't based on what you say.
Well, you go to this game and it'll be a long throw fest.
Mohamed Kudus has 5 assists for Tottenham in the Premier League this season, already just one short of his highest return in the competition for West Ham in the 23-24 campaign. And Thiago has scored 9 goals in his last 8 Premier League starts for Brentford, with these goals worth 8 points to the Bees. Gareth, lastly, what team do you think that Thomas Frank will go with? What formation will he go with? And score prediction?
I don't know. Do you know what? I have a feeling he might bring Danzo on for this game, just because of the Brentford long throw. He might have Danzo on there, because he probably is our best defender at heading the ball away if Brentford get those chances up near the Tottenham box.
We haven't seen it work. We haven't seen it work yet, though, have we?
No.
These long throws. We haven't seen it work.
No, I get that, but I think he might actually have him on there from a defensive point of view from those long throws as well. So where does he play Van de Ven's the only question, or Romero? That would be the one. So I'm going to say that he's going to come up. We saw him about left field here, and I think if he does this, he could well sign his own death certificate, because if he plays Danzo, Romero, and Van de Ven and a 3 at home, they Brentford are back 5, or he plays maybe Van de Ven at left back just to get Danzo into the team. That wouldn't surprise me, because can Doggy play again? Spence doesn't entirely look comfortable there. So I'm going to say he's going to go with a back 4. He's going to go with Porro, Romero, Danzo and Van de Ven as a left back in this game. I think he'll play. He can't go with Polina and Bentancur again, and I don't think Polina is a good player to play at home. I think he's better used away from home. I think Bentancur is much better on the ball than Polina. So Polina or Bentancur will play. I think Bergvall and Summons. I think he has to play Xavi Summons. If he doesn't play him in this game, I just don't know what it means for his future under Thomas Frank if he's here for longer. I think he's got to play him in this game. He's on the bench, so it's 4 games in a row, and a lot of different players have started games. He's one of them that hasn't started. I could kind of understand it against Newcastle because they're a big physical team. It's away from home. It's going to be difficult. We may not have as much of the ball. And this game, we should be getting on the ball and dominating. So I think he'll bring Summons in with Bergvall, and then could also play on the right. Odegaard, I think he will play on the left, and Kolo Muani as a striker. But if I had it my way, I would go Porro, Romero, Van de Ven, Udogie, Bentancur, Bergvall, and Summons, and then I would go Kudos, Richarlison, Kolo Muani. I think I would go. Just have Richarlison there as an extra attacking threat because Odegaard's done quite well at times when he's played, but he never really looks like scoring a goal. I know he scored one against Copenhagen, but not really a goal threat, whereas Richarlison, he gives you that option. So I would go with those two.
Score prediction?
Oh, says last week, Chris, we would find a way against Fulham in a nervy one. I'm hoping it's going to be, I've got the weeks wrong, and it's going to be this one. I think regardless, it's going to be a nervy game. It's going to end up a draw, or one team's going to nick up by a goal. So just going to tap Spurs to end this terrible record at home, and they're going to win by 2 goals. They won.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going with, Gareth. I think there's a lot of hope. Everything crossed on Saturday afternoon for Spurs to not only give us an entertaining game,
Chris, I'll just answer one of the questions here. Do you think Thomas Frank will be there in the 1st of January? I don't think he'll be there at Christmas if we don't win at least one of these next 2 games. And I think if he's going to get that far in January, he's got to pick up at least 2 or 3 wins in December. I don't know how we could justify Thomas Frank being the manager at Brentford on New Year's night if we haven't won a couple of games by
then. Yeah. Well, no easy games in the Premier League. We've gone through this tough run. We've got to come out of it at some point, and let's hope that Saturday afternoon, we're all going to be smiling, Saturday evening, having won at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium for the first time in the Premier League since the opening weekend against Burnley. So best of luck to Thomas Frank and, of course, the squad.